So I thought maybe I'd talk a little bit about dreams this week, and I know immediately what that probably makes you expect this video to be. A counsellor talking about dreams. That means this is either a video about the science and psychology of dreaming as best as we do understand it so far, or it's like a field guide on understanding dreams and some of their symbolism, or at least that's what I imagine you'll imagine. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just used to the fact that being a counsellor instantly means people can often expect me to be fluent in some sort of dream language. Sometimes you kind of get someone saying, I had this dream last night where whatever happens, and they'll explain it and then go, what does this mean? Like, I'll just instantly have a clear answer to explain all of it. You never do. I think they're very good things to talk about, especially in therapy, and I'm glad when people do, but there isn't ever the checklist sort of meaning that dream meaning websites present. We're more complicated than that. So this is a video about my experience with dreams, I suppose, sharing some of mine in my attempt to understand them, talking generally about dreams as a whole and about interpreting dreams as a whole. Can we get more fluent in this less clear-cut and more elusive, vague language of dreams and metaphor, and how can that be useful? So all of what I've said there isn't to say that the websites that offer dream meanings and explanations for certain things, it's not to say they aren't useful or accurate. I don't really ever use them myself, but I know they can be good. Like there's that classic example of men randomly having a dream about being pregnant and feeling incredibly weird about it, but a quick look online will tell them it's surprisingly common a dream for even men to have, and that can tend to be to do with feeling the growth of new ideas, of beginnings, or being in a time of gestation over some idea or thing in your life, more symbolically pregnant. And I think those kind of websites can be increasingly detailed over the years compared to what I think they were when I was younger. And why not give things a Google? Those times you do have a very vivid, very strange and impactful dream that feels meaningful, but you have no idea why or what to think about it. Why not see what the internet says? Having said that, and having talked about symbolism like a disordered language, it's not necessarily a universal one, because different images can have different connotations to us, either due to our culture or our personal feelings, and that can affect what things mean. And even if it can't, being told the meaning of a symbol online might not necessarily help us dig deeper into how that relates to our current experience. But more so, I think we can sometimes get too caught up in the clear symbols when maybe they're not the key things about a certain dream. Sometimes it's how you felt in a dream about the events that happen in it, or if there's a general narrative in a dream that can be stitched together, or if it fits a pattern with other dreams you've had, or being able to link it to something in your real life in a way that no checklist could do, and in a way there is no clear answer for. Those are things you can only realise in reflecting or just freely rambling on about it with someone else. And if I am talking about therapy here, though I don't think I really was, but if I am, sometimes you'll talk about a dream in therapy, but it doesn't seem to come to any understanding, and you don't get any answer until like a few weeks later, where you might be talking about something else, something in your real life, and you'll suddenly go, hang on, that's like the thing in the dream. Oh, now I get what that was about. You know, I don't do this sort of stuff much in my own work because I tend to work with younger children. However, it used to happen to me in my own therapy, and I know it does happen. Or it happens just reflecting on my own life. Let me give an example though. Years and years ago, I had this beautiful dream where I was a bear. I once wrote a short story loosely based on it, but I adored the dream because I genuinely felt like a bear in it, and then I woke up and was like, damn, I wish I could shapelift into a bear now, that was amazing. But to be brief, in this dream I got glared at by a lot of people for being a bear, and being judged like that, it made me very angry in the dream and destructive, and I went about roaring and smashing stuff until there was this flute player who played a song, and it all just lulled me back down into a happy, dozy state where I felt accepted. and that was kind of where the dream ended. It was a very nice, peaceful ending, and for ages that was just a weird but cool dream until several months later it randomly popped into my head again, only this time it seemed quite obvious to me. That was about my anger and not feeling I'm allowed to express it, having to keep it hidden, having to be nice, and at that time in my life, at that age, a desperation for acceptance, really. Some place to be accepted, or someone to be accepted with, even for my more negative or bear-like sides that were glared at. And probably about self-acceptance too, possibly about the fact I was a very angry kid and I didn't need to be judging myself harshly for that. I mean, I know I've not given much context around it there, but I suppose I'm just saying all this because a Google of what bears mean in dreams might give some insight, but I think as a whole, if you do want to understand dreams, it's often better not to search for their meaning like a clear-cut thing of symbols, but to more generally reflect about how it felt for you, what was significant to you, if there was a narrative in a dream, what it would be saying, even just to stop and question what do I think about bears or whatever. Not that I do that much, I tend to just prefer enjoying my dreams as this fun, innocent thing. Sometimes though, I think dreams do have pretty obvious meanings that, for whatever reason, we just can't see, and I guess those are situations when talking about it to someone can be useful, albeit possibly quite emotional in a way you might not always be ready for. I'll give this example actually because it's kinda heartbreaking. Someone I know, I'll be vague because I never feel comfortable sharing stuff about people I know, even if this is just a dream. But several years ago her dad died, and then I guess a few months later we were just having lunch around the table, a load of us, and she happened to say she had a weird dream the night before where her dad was there and they were going to go sailing. And the idea of being on the shore about to sail out feels significant, although also personal to her because sailing was something they did both do together. He used to own a sailing boat when she was young, and he taught her how to sail. Anyway, they were going out, and she got in the boat and got everything ready, then turned, and he was still on land. And she said in the dream, "Well, aren't you coming?" And he said, "No, you can manage on your own now." Which is just heartbreaking, isn't it? I mean, it's nice. It's so nice and positive, but the experience in the dream world of the dad who raised you and taught you how to sail and has now passed on, telling you you're okay to manage on your own now and that you can manage because you're all grown and you're free to sail out to sea without him. It's so moving and so fitting in a way only dreams can be, which I think also illustrates their power to evoke experiences within ourselves. I touched on this in my Wizard of Oz video, although that may or may not have been released by the time I released this because it got blocked. On a literal level though, the sailing thing was just a dream that didn't actually happen in a literal sense. However, it feels like it did, and it feels like you got that closure, and that can have a lasting impact on your heart. That's kind of incredible when you think about it. You imagine something that felt so real it did actually affect you in reality and did impact your heart. The idea that imagination can be that powerful is kind of insane. So whilst dreams and metaphor definitely aren't a language and definitely are something quite personal to us, they also sort of are a language, one we're already actually fluent in, because otherwise how would we have thought up such meaningful and symbolic dreams in the first place? We probably do already know deep down what our brains are on about, it's just being able to make that conscious that's the difficulty, and forming those connections between the upstairs and downstairs brain, as they say, which is very similar to what you do in film analysis or poetry analysis or creating art or just creativity as a whole. Maybe not always consciously, but it's a similar sort of connection going on, I think. And I tend to feel part of it comes down to being curious without being overwhelmed, without having to grasp at the meaning too frantically because the not knowing feels uncomfortable, but also being able to sort of play around with the meaning like a puzzle or like a lump of clay. That's all kind of, I guess, about trusting our brains, really. Trusting that they will figure out with time. And I think the easier we trust, the more relaxed and free we are to play about and think with curiosity rather than franticness. But also not being overwhelmed by the emotion of the dreams either. I mean, people forget that reflection can be very painful. That dream about sailing and her dad is a very painful one, for example. It's positive, but had she consciously realised what she was saying at that moment, I don't know, you'd probably get very teary. And even if we're doing the reflecting by ourselves, just like sitting on our own daydreaming, sometimes it is painful because we realise very moving things about ourselves, sometimes facing up to what feel like flaws, or, like I say, even the positive things can be uncomfortable because they're a sudden flood of emotion. Sometimes we prefer not to understand. Sometimes I suspect we block the conscious understanding because feeling emotional is difficult. The same often with empathy. So I suppose that's what I mean by being curious without fear. Not being afraid to feel moved, trusting that it can be a bearable experience, and then once it does feel more bearable, actually quite a positive one. I have no idea why, but I dream very vividly and remember my dreams most nights, often remembering several from each night, and as I say, I don't often think about the meaning of them because I'm not that bothered, but sometimes you do realise interesting things, and I realised a pattern quite a while back, that fairly often, say once every few weeks, I'd have some sort of dream that involved going to school, and this is where personal context is important because this could be seen as one of those dreams where you're worried about being late and there's some big rush or whatever, or you know, like those dreams where you're back at school and you've got an exam to do that you haven't prepared for, which somebody once told me is a dream people often get more commonly when they're old. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I half wonder if that can be to do with, like, thinking about death and your mortality and this ending you're unprepared for. No idea. Anyway, this isn't one of those dreams. It's confused with personal context as well because this is also a school I went on to work at for a couple of years. This same school I went to as a kid. And it's never about being at the school anyway, actually. It's about getting the bus, because I lived in a remote village. We had this little minibus that was owned by the school and driven by one of the staff that went specifically to collect the kids outside the ordinary bus routes, which was great, really. It was like this little community of about 14 or 10 or so kids who often had whole bus conversations in this little van. Anyway, these dreams did often involve me missing the bus, or sometimes catching it but being very late, or sometimes just choosing not to get it at all. But it never had that feeling of panic about being late. That wasn't an emotion in the dreams, and I think that's very important and a good example of how emotion does affect the meaning. Because it was fine I didn't get it. I could drive my car instead. In the dreams I had the car I now have, but obviously didn't when I was a kid, and I could just drive in by myself when I needed to, and there was an important sense of independence in that and having control over my life there. Or occasionally these dreams would be me at school waiting for the bus home, sitting like around this picnic bench area we had outside the minibus, waiting for the driver to come so we could go. But I'd be there in the dream talking to everyone, and they might ask, "Are you getting the bus home today?" And sometimes I would in the dream, and other times I'd say, "No, I feel like driving myself." It was quite relaxed either way. And it's funny, because once I realised there was this pattern of dreams I tended to get, and that there was this common thread of meaning throughout them, once I realised it, suddenly I've never had that dream again. Which is just interesting, you know? I guess whatever my brain was trying to tell me had finally done its job. because I think it was a dream about realising how much I've grown. Even the idea of going back to work at the school I used to be a student at, there's a significance in that, I guess. Dreams about going back to school could feel belittling and shrinking back into the more vulnerable kids we once were, but in this context, I think the dream was kind of the opposite. Going back to where I was in order to see how I've changed compared to then. You know, I've often had a tendency not to feel grown up enough. When I did my training as a counsellor, almost everyone else was above the age of 30, some of them in their 50s with a wealth of experience in social care jobs and all sorts and stuff, where I was 21 without any experience whatsoever. And even when I did get that job at the school that I used to be a student at, there's a bizarre feeling about being around these staff members who used to tell you off as a kid, and I think that did make it hard to feel grown up, especially as it was a part-time job. I guess the imposter syndrome feelings around being a counsellor at what was a very young age to begin at the time, and I'm still only 25, you know, I'm still fairly young and developing a lot, and the weird experience of making YouTube videos, analysing stuff, and how it can inadvertently make it look like I'm some really good counsellor when I'm not. I'm still growing. I don't want to be seen on this channel as a very good counsellor, just someone ordinary sharing his thoughts as he muddles through life, and hoping some of that ordinary journey can relate in small ways. But I think all of that can add to the feeling that I'm not professional yet. I'm not properly grown up and a real counsellor. I'm not a proper YouTuber. I'm certainly not an author yet. I'm an imposter who's still a teenager at heart. And this recurring dream helped me realise that's not the case, that I can actually feel grown up now. Having this dream experience of going back to that place I used to be as a kid, where I used to hurry to catch the bus and felt dependent upon it, and yet being there again as I am now, and having the self-confidence and agency to be able to drive myself, there's an emotional impact there when I realise that goes beyond just being told, oh, you're grown up now, because it's really feeling it. It's having that experience that does impact the heart. So, dreams are beautiful, mysterious, powerful things that often don't make sense, but when they do, it hits, and for the most, that's a good thing. This hasn't been a counsellor talks about the power of dreams video, no, it's been me rambling on, as I often do, about my dreams and about what I feel about them. I hope in some way or another it was useful. Let me know your thoughts, your dreams, whatever else. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, support me on Patreon if you fancy, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Devin, Kestrel, Arwin, Stephen Legg, Janice McMahon, Samara Stousen, Sharikoff2814, Joshua C. Follier, Chad Bramwell, and Incomplete Sentience. Thank you.